for another meeting where I know that none of our schedules align very well. I just kind of went ahead and said I would tackle this initial discussion for us. And I actually had to have Brianna send me the last meeting notes because I was not prepared to tackle this at all today. So thank you very much for doing that. But I know that we had some homework to discuss. I don't know if anybody was able to reach out to some of our partners. I'm looking back at my screen because I have my notes on my other screen. For us to talk about some research and contacting that we might have been able to do, or at least look into what other areas do. Easier regarding recycling, at what level, were they state or local? I don't know if anybody got a chance to kind of take a look at some of that stuff. Kendra, I saw you just sent something.
You were frozen.
Sorry, unrelated. That's unrelated.
Oh, okay. Sorry, it just froze on my screen and was like, ah. So has anybody had an opportunity to try and reach out and get in contact with anybody or get any other information by chance?
Is this specifically in regard to like a certain topic?
The programs, policies around recycling that Jessica had sent out, that we were going to try and reach out and see what we can do to try and find out if there were other programs, policies, anything that was at a state or local level, how it was funded. Do we have any counterparts that have anything implemented?
I did reach out to the CEO of the Apartment Association here in Nevada, because she was going to a conference, and the one from Colorado, we'd heard that there is a program in Colorado that's working, seems to be working well, and it's been in place for a while. So she was going to talk with her and see, how is it really working from your side of it? And she was going to talk to some of the other states also to see what they have in place. I haven't heard back from her yet. That was just last week that she was doing that conference. So that reminds me to tag up with her.
I did a quick reach out, mostly to our neighboring counties, since I'm regulatory, so I tend to focus on some of those things and try to look into some of the recycling rules and things like that are in the neighboring state. California, since we're closely partnered, and Lockwood for me, who gets our local garbage up here, also gets a lot of California's too. So I felt it was kind of a good alignment. Pretty much everything's based off of a rule, and all the rules were done by the state assembly, and they were put in at the state level. Very little funding that went down to the local jurisdictions. Most of the local jurisdictions don't really govern it or have it unless they also oversee and or permit the like waste generation facility, the MRFs, or the landfills. So that's kind of where it is. But primarily, the way California has succeeded in gaining their recycling numbers is all by mandatory rule.
Yeah, I did reach out to people in my similar position in our area for other programs within waste management, and I did not get much feedback on multifamily recycling programs that were in an area where recycling was not mandated. So again, the mandates do tend to drive that. I agree with you, Wes, just based on what I've been finding and looking at. I did find an article that they're doing a pilot program in Columbus, Ohio, which is very similar to, I think, at least what I've been contemplating. So let me find that and I can send it to the group.
That'd be fantastic. One of the things, and Kendra, I had sent you an email earlier this week, or maybe it was last week, or maybe it was the week before. I don't remember anymore, but it was about sorting at the facility. And it was because when I was doing my research, Placer County made it look like they actually sent their trucks to Lockwood for sorting. And I had to research further and find their MRF to figure out what they were actually proposing. But go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to make it clear that Lockwood doesn't do anything really with recycling except for to set maybe scrap metal aside and then transport that for recycling. But all of our local recycling goes to Commercial Row. And actually, that's just a partial sort. The finished sort goes to Sacramento because it's a much bigger mousetrap over there.
Yeah, and I knew that about commercial. It was the way that Placer County was advertising their information, so to speak. And then Phoebe, one of the things that I think maybe you and I could chat in doing some of this, I'd kind of thought about also, in full disclosure, my board wants us to do more with recycling. And so Phoebe, I'd love to chat with you about maybe trying to find a potential way to do a recycling program at some of like a multi-family type of a facility and see if there's some way that we couldn't partner together and make it potentially worthwhile. It would have to be small. I don't see that we have the resources, or I don't know that I want to try and put anybody on the hook for having resources enough to handle large facilities or multiples of them. I don't know that we actually have the infrastructure to do it. I don't want to speak for Waste Management, but I think it'd be interesting to see how much work it actually takes.
I will tell you. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, maybe we can, Kendra, Carly, and I, and you can set up a separate meeting and just talk about what you're interested in.
Yeah, that'd be great. I think it would warrant some good conversation.
So I just put in the chat thing an article on the Columbus pilot project that they're working on. There's a link to the article. I've represented the apartment association for a whole bunch of years, bunch of sessions, and we did fight the mandating recycling in apartments a number of sessions ago, and the reason is what we talked about before. The landlords can't control where the tenants put their trash, and so then the landlord gets the nasty letter or gets fined if the recycling bins are contaminated with things that shouldn't be put in there. So what a lot of them do is they have a concierge service where the people have to put their trash out right in front of their front door, the recyclable things, and then somebody comes through and they pick them up and then they put them in the appropriate containers. They can't take it off property, but it has to stay on property, but they still make sure that they go into the right ones. And that's been about the only thing that works, that our landlords have found anyway. But, they're open. They say, if we could find something that works, great. It's just really tough, though, because you just can't control the tenants.
Go ahead.
That's a really good point, Susan. I feel like we've heard in many meetings with our commercial partners, especially our residential commercial partners, about this service, and that it used to be available in the Reno area, but for whatever reason, the provider who was doing it stopped doing it. So maybe there's a way we could incentivize it.
I'll find out about that. I'll find out who the vendor was and see what I can find out for you.
So one of the things I know that I'd been approached about was with even our board was wanting to discuss, like, how do we increase recyclables? How do we do that? And in reading a bunch of the articles, and I think I looked at the one from Columbus, and I may not have been. I know that Mark Cameron had sent me a bunch of articles as well. Kendra, it goes along like what you had talked about, and Susan as well. Most of them focus on a concierge, a lot of education type of a plan that would go forward. And so I think maybe Waste Management can't hold the bucket for having to do all of that. Neither can Republic. And I think that the health district certainly doesn't have the staff to go out and cite people for not putting stuff in the right bin and to do that either. And I also don't believe that it's the business that's providing the resource that has to do that either. So we have to come up with some sort of a medium component on education that works with on the in-between, either between business license and the facility or something directly with the facility in order to create some sort of a process that's there. And so there may be some opportunities. I think a third party that has that ability or can provide more of a concierge level service, kind of like I know we have we are much smaller than Vegas, obviously by space. So we do have a local group that does like a concierge type service where they'll collect your food scraps and for composting, and they advertise by doing it all on bike, and they go by, and it's a personal service.
And they may not be licensed.
They are permitted. They are permitted as a hauler. They do not have their own compost facility. They actually have to take that to Full Circle. But they have to. But there are opportunities for entities to come in to be able to help provide that higher level of service. But again, it has to be palatable for everybody who's getting it. It's probably not going to come for free.
So, I answered the recycling hotline, and I was talking to a tenant about recycling, and they had like their apartment complex, which I'm not sure, I don't remember which one it was, but they provide the concierge service through their management of the complex. So I don't think it necessarily has to be a third party doing that.
That's true.
Yeah, but it would be included in the rent, I'm sure. But what I was wondering, like, if you wanted to start with like what size complex would you want to start with? Because we're looking at multifamily, and so I was working with Suzanne from the city of Reno, and we were kind of breaking down, we got a list from Susie Vasquez from the apartment association, of all the facility, of all the apartment complexes. And so we were kind of looking at, do we want to start with smaller units or, like mid-size? But I was also thinking like maybe, just a property owner that has, a smaller building. Like my son lives in one that has maybe 15 units. And it's like working with somebody who is like he does provide it at one of his buildings, but not at that one. And so it's like, would it be better to work with a corporation or maybe just like a small owner to do a pilot program or, a couple of them? But we were, Suzanne was trying to get a university student to look into some of this, and we couldn't get a professor. So I was thinking we could help use our intern to kind of do some of that work for us. If, so I wouldn't mind being in on your meeting is what I'm trying to say, that you do. And then I could actually bring our intern in too, because, she needs a little work, especially during the winter break. So it might be a good project for her to work on. Just trying to figure out what direction we want to go with the multifamily.
Yeah, I think all those are great. And Patty, to your point, and Susan as well. I mean, I'm not necessarily saying that it would have to be a third party. It seems that third parties tend to be a little bit more successful because they're not relying on having It's not like having a property manager that has to have somebody who goes and make sure that they've got someone on site to do that services. And part of it just kind of comes down to, quite frankly, job availability. And I'm well aware that, you know, on the flip side, with our solid waste complaints, we tend to deal with a lot of property management places right now because they don't have enough staff, and we're having to write them notices for failure to deal with some of their waste as it is. So I think that it's a complex issue that is not easily solvable by any means, which is why I think it would lead to, you know, we'd have to figure out a more of a comprehensive approach that was a little bit more inclusive of, you know, education and how to do those things. And that's why I would probably target smaller places, you know, 15 to 20 units max, at least to start some type of a process, because otherwise you end up with the risk of, you know, somebody trying to figure out how to help sort a 50 unit place, and that might be a little daunting. I would probably lean towards starting on a real small scale, very limited type of a sample size, and work up for something like that idea. And first, I think it's a conversation with Phoebe and Kendra and Patty just to see if we can even come up with the resources to make something work.
Yeah, with regard to having a third-party vendor do it, as opposed to having the property manager have to have an employee to do it, what I understand from the apartment association is that it's much more cost-effective for them to hire the third-party vendor, the concierge service, because then you're not having to pay a staff person full-time, because there's enough stuff going out every single day.
I was thinking about size as well, because if you have a larger building, most of the time people deal with their trash on their same floor. They don't take it down to the dumpster themselves if it's a really large building. So maybe there's already a reasonable system in place at a much larger building, or it would be a lot easier at smaller facilities. So we do have a list that we've been working on of people that do recycle that we're going to reach out to and just say, you know, what's working for you, what's not, what kind of education do you think would be helpful? And I also wanted to share with you that corporate waste management has already put together a lot of resources for multifamily buildings. So I'll just share that in the chat. And I mean, we can share that with any of our customers now, and it's really completely built out. I don't think there's anything that we would really need to change at all. So as far as educational materials, we could certainly use the ones that we already have and that have been developed. I think, Patty, having an intern or other people that are willing to do outreach, that seems to be, from what I've seen, just overall the most effective way to get people on board with starting a recycling program is, you know, door to door, face to face with tenants, which would obviously be a lot of, you know, boots on the ground. And then also trying to find a way to address tenant turnover. So that's something that maybe Carly and Kendra and I can talk about as far as what types of print materials we can provide, or if we just want to provide them with a link to the site for those resources. But yeah, all of those things, I think that there is enough of a system in place that if we get kind of a plan and enough people willing to do and help with outreach, then I think we could put something pretty cool together.
I think the other thing that would be a component to this is, and Patty, I don't know if this is reasonable or not, but how would facilities, or even if it was waste management that was picking up the recycling, how is this type of recycling tracked so that we could actually include it as like successes for demonstrating that even these voluntary places that are multifamily are actually making a dent or getting at least some type of a response for doing this type of activity? And then how do we also report it out?
Well, I mean, the multifamily are commercial accounts, right? Kendra or Carly or BB. So I don't know if you guys track it. You know, I guess you would know which ones are which apartment complexes are recycling, but their waste is being collected as commercial. So I don't know how to track it.
So maybe that's something we could look at the state level of figuring out if there's a method to track recycling from some of the other types of facilities besides just a straight commercial, because I don't believe Waste Management is the only one that does recycling in Washoe County.
I can have the apartment association survey at least all of their members. They don't have all of the apartment complexes in the state, but vast majority of them, probably 70+%. So they can survey the members and find out which ones do actively offer recycling facilities for tenants.
Mm-hmm.
If that would be helpful. And then also, you know, give us some notes on what's working for them, what's not working.
Yeah, it'd really be interesting to know what's working in other parts of the state. I mean, there could be other areas that may have some really good knowledge that we just don't have in this area here.
Okay, I'll find out for you. I'll get that statewide. Hopefully I can get that for you.
At this point, anything's better than nothing, because the only thing that I found are that it takes a rule to do recycling, and if we have to have a rule, then that's a reg change.
It's also a statute change.
Or it's a
heavy mandate.
Or it's a local.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because there is already statute on it. There is statute on it that says that for any new apartment complexes built after October 1, 2009, maybe
Yeah.
2009, that they have to at least have recycling facilities.
They have to have the space for the container. It doesn't mean they have to have the container.
Really?
Yes.
Well, that doesn't make much sense.
And that was because the apartment complexes were saying they didn't have space.
Right.
And so then when they did that, it was, like you said, around 2009, 2011, that it went into effect, I think. But it was, so new complexes and major remodels have to have the space allocated for the bin, but that doesn't mean they have to have the bin. And so that's kind of what we've been, but you know, like we were saying,
well, we were pretty sneaky with that one, weren't we?
Yeah.
I didn't realize that was the case.
I mean, the problem has been that there is no, you know, none of this is mandatory for them to recycle and, you know, to actually recycle. So they, and then, I mean, one of the other things that, one of the other statute changes that was made was that for the business, the building, or I guess it was business licenses, that they're supposed to offer information to the new businesses, or I guess just even when you get your business license renewed, that you get information on recycling, and most of them don't do that. And I did get the city of Reno to like put that on their website a couple years ago. So I just, like I'll look on their websites and just send people emails. It's like, hey, you're supposed to do this. And City of Reno did, but City of Sparks didn't do it. But that's part of the problem with our regs, is that there's no consequences. And so that's one thing I think the policy group is gonna be looking at, is like, well, can we have any consequences if you don't follow these rules that we have? So it's a tough situation. I agree with Wes. And there was a study done in Clark County a number of years ago on multifamily recycling, and I can find that. It was done by UNLV. So there was some. And I think it's the same. It's like you said, the main problems are the tenant turnover. I think just having, locking up the bins and having only the tenants that are interested in actually recycling have a key or something like that, like restricting access to the recycling, at least, to the recycling bins or something like that. But it's a tough situation to get a handle on, and I think that having like in St. Paul, Minnesota, they have the recycling ambassador program, and they do they have to volunteer 20 hours a year to be a recycling ambassador. And so they get trained, and then they go, and they have this, other places too. Like I think in Washington, like in Seattle, they were doing, I don't know if they still do it, but they were doing it, where they train ambassadors at their apartment complexes to talk to other tenants about it. So definitely having that face-to-face contact with, and maybe, at least with the new tenants, if you can get something. But that's one thing we were kind of interested in, is like, okay, if you have a new complex that hasn't opened yet, it's like, can we get in there and have, so that when they move in, everybody's on the same page and start, we were trying to do that before COVID hit, so we haven't gone back to that. But, we were looking at a couple places. I mean, we were also thinking like the ones near the university that I don't know if they're quite finished or when they're going to be ready. There's quite a few places there that are, opening soon, but that may be, I had a university student last spring working on a project, and she did a survey of university students living in, some of the current housing, and what they knew and what they didn't know, and, things like that. And so, if we could get in on the ground floor of the opening of one of those places and just, start them off right, I think that would be a really cool project. And, we could help do some of that.
I think you bring up some great points. Most of those are open already.
Yeah.
Some of the big issues and the things that I had read about are exactly what you said. You have ambassadors, and you volunteer for 20 hours, but somebody has to train them. And most of the agencies that were actually providing the ambassadors and or providing the training were either city through business license or county through like some type of an oversight program. And so it takes additional funding and things like that. And then Kendra, I just saw you raise your hand. And I wanted to actually say that one of the articles that I have read recently highlighted, I believe it was Waste Management's print material in how they did individual recycling containers. And so they had specific recycling containers for glass and plastics and things like that. And they limited what was there to being able to be recycled, because it could go into whatever sorter was regionally available in that area. And they targeted that type of a thing, kind of similar to you see in some cities with specific recycling bins with pictures and things like that, that made it as easy as possible. So I thought that was something that was kind of important and something that maybe we could look at and go forward. And Kendra, I believe your hand was up.
Yeah, I just want to add to what both you and Patty are saying, and I apologize because this mostly focuses on the Northern Nevada area. But before COVID hit, we had started to brainstorm a program where we could do recycling ambassador training at our facility, our MERV facility, because as we were going out and doing presentations in groups like Lions Club and Kiwanis and different HOAs, we were getting some, usually seniors, coming forward and saying that they were really really big into recycling and they really wanted to help spread the message and what could they do. So we've got an appetite in the community for people who would just volunteer for this. And as we get closer to getting that MRF back open to the public, that's a potential thing where WM could fund it. We could do the training and keep them close as far as what we're actually doing in our community, because it would be beneficial not just to the community, but to the program in general.
Well, so I think we need to chat, because that would fall right in to my mind for how we could run a pilot program. Because so I'll flat out tell you, like, based off of what my board is asking for, they want to see more recycling in Washoe County. They want to see more tracking of recycling in Washoe County. They would like to see those things. Now, granted, right back to Patty's point, it's all voluntary. None of it is tracked. I can't produce any numbers for any of it. I have no way of producing numbers for any of it. So one of the items, the other thing is they're board members. They don't really understand the level of work it takes to do this. So my proposal was to actually reach out to you, Kendra, originally before this meeting, which was going to be, hey, I want to sit down with Waste Management. I want to sit down with KTMB and figure out a plan of how would we create some sort of an educational component. Could Waste Management even service these facilities? How would we do this? How do we package this up? And basically take it to my board, and then take it to each of the city boards or the city councils, and have each member identify a small apartment place that they would partner with, so that they are each invested in this process as well, while we provide an ability to create this type of a more educational approach to how would this actually occur. Go for it, Susan. I saw your hand was up too.
Thank you. Well, one thing that I wanted to ask, and Patty, probably you would have a good handle on this, is how is our businesses doing with recycling also, and how is the state doing with the state offices and recycling in their own offices? I'm in the museum towers right next to the museum, the old Porsche building, 12-story building. We don't have recycling at this building. We don't have any facilities for it. I would love to. I'm on our sustainability committee I chair the thing for the firm, and we put out some recycling containers, and cleaning crew comes in at night and they just dump everything all in together because there's no place to put it. So maybe it'd be good to know how state agencies are doing, what their numbers are, and if that's being tracked at all.
So last, a couple, I guess 2 sessions ago, we got, so state agencies are supposed to keep track. And as a state agency ourselves, our data isn't perfect either. So what we do is look at how many bins we have and how often it gets picked up, and just kind of estimate it from there, because we can't really weigh our own materials. So I don't think it's being tracked very well. I think it's kind of educated guesses, really. just based on our service level, you know, what containers we have. And part of the problem with state agencies is that we don't own all of the buildings that we occupy. And so we run up against the same thing you do, where, you know, the landlord doesn't provide services. So, you know, and even with the multifamily, it's kind of up to the tenants to bug the managers to get recycling in the building or a complex. And so that's kind of the situation we're at. And our recycling data is not perfect. We've been trying to get a handle on, you know, making it better, but it's really not easy. For, you know, like I said, we don't weigh it. We get estimates, you know, we can get estimates from Waste Management or from Republic based on service levels, but they're not going to, you know, have exactly our exact data per building or agency, or, you know, it's not easy to collect. So I think it is something we need to work on improving for sure.
Well, it's especially when it's all voluntary. And then just real quick, Kendra, I was going to comment to Patty. I know at Washoe County, we don't have recycling here at the county complex either. Mostly because other people have access to the bins. We're in the same boat. I can't tell you how many times I've actually had to go out and sort through the trash to call somebody and tell them to come back over and pick up their trash from their house that they dumped in our trash here. So, you know, we're in the same boat. I know City of Reno's in the same boat too. They have recycling bins outside their city building. So unless they're recycling internal and doing something different, that said, I think we can all be better, but it's also, there's no impetus without a rule that says that we need to. Everybody's going to save the money. Kendra, shoot for it.
Yeah, and true
I think that was your
confession.
hand.
Yeah, true confession. At the Vassar office, we didn't have recycling in my office either. It was collected and then put in the trash because we've learned that you have to pay the maid service or your sanitation service extra money to separate it out, even if those bins are available. So people don't do it. And I just wanted to add on to what Patty was saying as far as getting those numbers from Republic or from Waste Management. Wes, you pointed out that there are other recyclers in the Washoe County area. So you'd have to get that information from them too. And then my understanding from previous conversations with the health district here in Washoe County was that we have some people like a Amazon warehouse or Walmart warehouse where they do their own cardboard recycling, and they won't give us any insight into those numbers as far as what they're recycling so that we can add that to our diversion.
I do get reports from Costco, Walmart, and Target.
Oh, good.
Annually, yeah. But you can see, like, I think it was especially the Target data that it's like, okay, it's the same for every store. So what does that tell you? That they're estimating it as well. But we do get some information on their backhaul stuff. Yeah. So, but that's funny. So in our building, when I started, I was the one emptying the bins, and because we have a third party, you know, that cleans the building, and I was successful in getting them in the contract too, you know, doing that. But we did have to pay them for that, which, you know, a lot more than the time it takes. But, you know, they did it. And my point when I asked them, you know, the management to pay for it is like, well, if they're picking up garbage, you know, recycling needs to be included in the cost of doing business and treated as not a voluntary add-on. It should be part of the cost, you know, not make it, because it's not that I didn't like doing it, you know, but it's like, okay, I'm trying to do other stuff, and then you're paying me, you know, 3 times what you're paying the cleaning staff, you know. So it just made more sense to pay the cleaning staff to pick up empty the recycling bins than to make me do it. I shouldn't say make me do it.
our issue here at this building is that even if we have it separated in here and they keep it separated, there's only one trash bin down in the loading dock. That's, I mean, the great big dumpster in the loading dock.
Right.
That's it. Now, our papers we collect here in the law firm because they go to a shredder and then they go on to a recycler. But that's the only thing that does get recycled, unless I want to haul off the cans myself and stuff.
Mm-hmm. And that's a common theme in a lot of places in a lot of cities because of planning requirements. You have to have X number of parking spaces for buildings and things like that. And I can appreciate that. I completely get it. It's something that I have discussed with the city of Reno with apartment complexes going forward. And I know that we've had a number of new apartment complexes. Froze. Oh, sorry, I froze on everybody. So I think going forward, I think some of the themes that we've all been discussing are, one, it's not easy. Two, there are going to be specific types of programs, I think, depending on the area and the size and what we can actually administer and or fit into our region of influence as we go forward. So some of the things I think for the next meeting as we start to focus on this are going to be, hopefully, Susan, if you can reach out and hear back if there's other successful programs either implemented individually. Phoebe, I know that you had sent the resources, so that'll be fantastic. If Brianna, we can include that in the next email, the links that were included from Susan and Phoebe, so that we have those going forward too. And then maybe some ideas from the group of how best could we move forward with some sort of recycling type programs, ideas, thoughts. You know, and I know it's real easy to target small ideas, and maybe that's the best way to do it. Maybe we find some small ideas or smaller implementable ideas that are a little less, for lack of a better term, work at first, and then we can build up to bigger ideas as we go forward, so that maybe when we can all meet again, we can have some tangible thoughts to go along with where we're at. I know enforcement's on there, and I think it's important because it's going to be something that's going to have to come back to NDEP. And Patty, one of the things that I think would be interesting to see is if there's a reporting mechanism or a method to report from, you know, that we're being successful in even this venture. If it all goes into commercial, we never really know what we've done for some of the multifamily housing things. So it would be nice to be able to take back to Susan and say, hey, you know, you can take back to the apartment association that all these things, like this is how much they're diverting. And it helps influence the idea of that they're making an impact in some of our plans going forward. So maybe we can find a way to move forward together. I don't know what do you guys think about some of those thoughts?
Yeah, I think that sounds good.
Cool. Well, do we want to, if anybody has anything else, otherwise we can probably save 15 minutes off of your day.
Sounds good.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Kendra, I'm going to shoot you an email to maybe we can sit down and you can loop Phoebe and Carly in and maybe we can set a meeting up to chat.
That would be great.
Cool. Thank you guys.